So, your final in Pittsburgh for one of what can only be described as the games of all time is going to end up being Dallas 20, Pittsburgh 17. And if last week was a loss that at least carried momentum through into the next week, based on how we performed in the second half, this was a performance that absolutely killed any sort of momentum that this team had moving forward. Uh, Defense, I will give them their props. The defense played great. Uh, the special teams were solid enough. They did their job. Defense forces 3 turnovers, forces Dak to throw 2 interceptions, has a fumble. 2 of those turnovers, of course, coming in the red zone. Still, the offense only manages to put up 17 points in what I can only describe as a spineless showing. The offense was anemic for large portions of this game. And this is what happens when you rely on a bend but don't break defense. You're going to get outgained by large amounts of yards over the course of a game. When you can't convert on third down, when you can't throw the ball over the middle of the field. Like, all these little things are going to add up. When you can't control time of possession, especially with this Steelers football team, you are going to lose football games. And, the thing is, I don't think there's one person at fault for this one, is the worst part. As just as an immediate reaction, immediate fault goes to Arthur Smith. The play calling, particularly in that first half, was Matt Canadian is the best way that I can describe it. Just with some semblance of a run game. It's running Najee east-west when he's best north-south. It's, fairly easy to decipher runs. It's passes, which are either 3 to 5 yards downfield and just try to have somebody miss, or they're chucking it up downfield where the receivers have the balls bouncing off their hands, or, into very tight coverage because that's really the only one-on-one option that we have coming. Just nothing opened up throughout the entirety of the game, and that's, in my opinion, largely because the play calling is incredibly basic. Of course, we'll dive into the stats in just a second. But the play calling was just bad. And I don't know if the concern there is due to some injuries, particularly at running back. Of course, we're missing Cordero Patterson and Jalen Warren, both who see a rather significant amount of snaps over the course of a football game. But I don't think that's a valid excuse to what we saw, because a lot of the play calling we saw was bad, and Dallas wanted to hand us this game. If that wasn't clear enough from the 3 turnovers, from the amount of penalties they took, from how inefficient Dallas was in the red zone, it was clear that Dallas did not want to win this football game. Did they keep fighting? Absolutely. But Dallas didn't play to win this football game. Our defense came out and played to win this football game. And our offense was just not willing to support them. A couple of instances where we shot ourselves in the foot. A couple of back-to-back penalties. We had what was effectively a 3-and-out on a drive where we accrued about 15 yards of offense and then ended with a sack. Just overall, it was bad. And it's, Justin Fields, he did not play well. Dallas secondary respected them, came in with a game plan, were able to cover our receivers very well. It's clear that we need some semblance of help at receiver, whether that's Roman Wilson coming back into the lineup, whether that is potentially trading for Devontae Adams, where there are rumors that we are looking for the wide receiver out of Vegas here at this point. But some change has to be made, and it has to start at the top with Arthur Smith, because we cannot afford to come out so slowly. So, stop you from my monologue for the past 5 minutes, and I'll swap us over. Looking at the post-game summary, and of course we'll look at the team stats first, and then we'll kind of go through some more of the box score stuff. But obviously we got outgained first downs by 8. Third down efficiency, 3 of 12. Unacceptable. We cannot afford to go 3 of 12 on third down throughout the course of a game, especially when you have a Dallas team that's operating at an above a 500 clip. When you're operating at 3 and 12 on third down, that is not something you can do. Yes, we got 2 of those on fourth down, so 5 of those 12 were converted. That is still less than 50%. That is not acceptable. We had 18 less total plays than Dallas did. We got outgained in yards by just short of double. And is that good in a game where we lost by 3, where, hey, we're still in it with a chance to end the game with our defense, and we're being outgained by, double the yards over a course of a game? Sure, you can look at it that way. But when you're getting outgained by double, that is a serious, serious problem with offensive scheming, especially against a Dallas team that is missing Micah Parsons, who is absolutely one of the best defensive players in the league. I will give him his props there. Micah Parsons is one of the best defensive players in the league, one of the best edge rushers in the league. That goes without saying that man is an insane, insane talent. If him and DeMarcus Lawrence are missing, you have to put up 300 yards of offense, and that's unacceptable. And that, I believe, is what comes down to Arthur Smith's offense. And yes, 4 or 5 passes bounced off wide receivers' hands. That's not enough. That's not enough of an excuse. 10 drives, average 4 yards of play. That's not enough. 16 to 28 through the air. Again, a lot of that comes to incompletions. A good chunk of missed passes, 3 sacks conceded as well. Isaac Samalo was solid in his return, but the O-line wasn't excellent today. But again, we didn't turn the ball over. Only 92 yards of rushing on 26 attempts. That's also not good enough. Plain and simple. We were rushing the ball effectively, and it also felt like at times we abandoned that as an option in short yardage situations. Went to a pass and ended up throwing it incomplete on a 3rd and 2 or losing yards due to a sack, and that killed drives. And again, just wasn't enough. We averaged as many yards per rush as Dallas. Defense really struggled to stop a very poor Dallas run game. I don't think it's any stretch to say that Dallas's run game is not one of their strengths. Their strength is that pass game, as shown by 336 total yards, but we still let up 109 yards of rushing. This team, whether it's due to injury or whether it's due to a middle linebacking core that is not set up to stop the run of Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson, who, while they have been solid players in their own right, whether they are an answer to a run-stopping game, I think certainly comes into question. Again, 11 penalties for 87 yards for Dallas, and that's just the accepted ones. 8 penalties, 50 yards for the Steelers. That's simply unacceptable. And then 3 turnovers for Dallas. That's 1 turnover for the Steelers, but that's just on a hook and lateral play at the end of that game. Just not acceptable. And when you don't control the possession clock, when you have those 3 turnovers, again, I feel like that becomes a fault of the offense. But again, gotta have some changes in there for next week. And again, looking at the stats, Kyle Allen was briefly in the game. We attacked the middle of the field with the passing game on that first drive and never seemed to go back to it. Najee, 14 carriers for 42 yards, 3 yards a carry. He needs to be better, otherwise he will not be back next year. As much as I love the guy, he will not be back. He was also a leading receiver. George Pickens, 7 targets, 3 catches, a couple of drops, but of course a couple of them in tight coverage, but a couple of balls bouncing off their hands. If we're not doing catch drills this week, somebody needs to be fired. Plain and simple. Rico Dowdle, 20 carries for 87 yards. was definitely a clutch player late, being able to pick up those first downs. Dak 29 and 42 for 352 yards, especially the deep ball. 48 yards, the longest reception for Jalen Tolbert. 34 for Cavante Turpin. 27 for Ferguson and Lamb. 22 for Rico Dowdle. Like, that's too many receivers. Over 20 yards is their longest reception. Like, that is untenable. We cannot continue to have that. And so that's gonna be a big issue, big issue going forward. So lots of issues on this Steelers football team that are gonna have to be next week, because still some time before the bye. But yeah, your Steelers fall to 3-2, and after what looked like a strong start to the season, looking to falter a little bit with back-to-back 3-point losses to both the Colts and the Cowboys. Of course, we do go to Las Vegas next week to take on the Raiders. So, certainly, again, another chance at a bounce-back game against a struggling team. They just dropped to the Broncos fairly considerably. So, again, if I do a preview game for that, or preview video for that, hopefully you'll see it. But things need to change. This was not good enough. This was not a good showing, particularly this was not a good showing on the offense. And games like this and play calling like this is what got Matt Canada fired. And if he's not careful, this sort of play calling will get Arthur Smith run out of town in a year. Plain and simple. But at the end of the day, your final score is Dallas 20, Pittsburgh 17. Pittsburgh falls to 3-2 and now second in the AFC North. Dallas improves to 3-2 and second in the NFC East. And of course, we'll see you next weekend for Steelers Raiders at the bare minimum. And until then, see you next time.